Call the September 22nd meeting of the Planning Commission to order, 27th, I'm sorry, to order. We'll begin with the pledge to the flag, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Sidoti.
Here.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Here.
Mr. Varga.
Here.
Mr. Cicero.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Perkovic.
Here.
Mr. Snow.
Here. Entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of the September 6th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Just when you're ready.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. We have 3 public hearings this evening. The format we follow for public hearings is we allow the applicant an opportunity to tell us what they want to do at a particular location. Then those wishing to speak in favor are afforded a similar opportunity. Then those wishing to speak against are given an opportunity. And then if anybody has questions, maybe just generic questions, you can speak at the end of the negative portion. So with that in mind, the first public hearing this evening is a conditional use permit to allow outside dining and/or drinking at 8434 Menor Avenue. I see that applicant's here, so if you'd come forward and identify yourself for the clerk, please.
Michael Arsham, operating partner, Longfield Properties, Sky Bistro.
Rob Neen, owner, Sky Properties, or Longfield Properties LLC. Sorry.
Okay, and give us a quick overview of what you want to do there. I know that you've been doing it, but we still need an explanation of what you want to do, so.
Fair enough. I wrote something real quick to answer that question,
Okay.
to go real fast.
Fine.
On Monday, August 27th at 4:30, we were made aware for the first time that we were operating without a conditional use permit for outside dining. Immediately Tuesday, we came here to City Hall and picked up the application to come to council and receive our permits. We are a small family business working hard to represent Menor and trying to succeed in business, and will not do anything against the laws of the city that we all equally should be asked to abide by. Our outside dining area has been open for approximately 8 years. Before opening, we had to receive all of our permits to operate, and one would think all permits would have been received, including our conditional use permit. We have passed every inspection with the city, state, and Lake County, as well as Best Western Corporation, that holds us to an incredibly high standard of quality. We checked with Menor Police. We have had 0 noise complaints, and our liquor license reflects we pay for all the areas in question. Everything the CUP's proposed conditions have been met and have always been met. However, it does say that access to our patio was from the hotel restaurant only. This is not true. We have always had an ADA compliant legal gate for another entrance and exit that is often used. I have a picture showing the gate because that was something that was on the proposed conditions. At this point, please ask me any questions so I can put you at ease, but we hope to accomplish receiving our conditional use permit. Thank you.
Kath, did you want to see that?
I was just going to suggest we put it down on the table so that everyone can view it. There we
There you
go.
go. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak against? Close the public portion. Kathy, any comments from the administration?
No, we've spoken internally with the fire chief with regard to their concerns. From a planning standpoint, they're comfortable with the arrangement of the outdoor dining as it is, and any additional fire code requirements they will work out with the owner outside of the planning commission approval of the CUP.
So we don't need to worry about that. That's something that
Said-
the applicant and the chief can work out, or?
Yes,
the
he
fire
said it doesn't
department?
need to hold up the conditional use permit. He will work through that with him individually.
Okay. Commissioners, questions for the applicant or the administration?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Varga?
have you always served the food and the drink on the porch? Is that something you've been doing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that, so I just want, and so you've not had any problem with people wandering off the porch with with alcohol or anything like that. That's
No, that would be A, illegal, and B, there is a
Right,
gate.
okay.
So, no, and we
So,
watched
so
it.
there is a restriction to the porch area, so they just don't, people just don't wander off away from there.
Now,
That is correct,
we've
sir,
had some
yes.
correspondence from the adjacent property owner. Jess, you have that handy?
Yes.
Would you read it real quick for us?
It says, I can't make the meeting, but wanted to comment on the proposed CUP for the hotel/restaurant. Since many of the trees buffering the Lawnfield patio were removed during recent construction, I hope the Planning Commission will require something along the eastern side of their patio to buffer sound from traveling onto my property. Since the patio and existing pillars encroach on my property, the buffer would need to be installed on the inside of the patio fence. That is from Mr. Sandin of Brunner, Sandin, and Dietrich.
Any comments, Michael, with regard to that email?
Oh, I have to say that what little music that is so soft that you can talk, doesn't really travel cross property line.
How
A lot
about
of
the,
times
how about
it's
the
not even
question of the
used.
landscaping?
Well, Sandon pulled the trees down. I mean, so
Whose trees were they?
they were both of ours, but they also encroached on his, so to cut half the tree down would have killed the tree.
Right. Any comments from the administration with regard to the landscaping?
There is sufficient landscaping that encloses the patio area.
So we don't need to worry about that,
Not in our opinion, no.
okay?
And do we have proper buffering? It's all within code?
It's within code.
Okay.
Anything else you'd like to add, Michael?
No, sir, other than concern on the music, please. It is, if on at all, so soft that it doesn't really go over property line.
Well, you can't cross the property line anyway with the sound. Is that correct, Ms. Mitchell? You can't, the sound cannot travel across property lines.
Well, right, it's supposed to meet our noise control ordinance,
Right.
and as he's indicated, they've not violated that.
So the chief has not any concerns with regard to the noise.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
One other question.
Right ahead.
You don't have any live music ever on the patio?
No, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Chairman,
Mr. Sidoti,
Madam Clerk, did you state in that letter from Mr. Sandin that a portion of the patio encroaches onto his property?
That is what was written in the letter.
Is that true that your patio encroaches onto the adjacent property?
The patio, no, sir. There is a column that is 2.75 inches on his property line. We did settle that with Sandin by purchasing a portion of the fence that he wanted in lieu of having to take the 2 inches of the column down.
Okay,
So that has been satisfied.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
any other questions? Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve with 5 conditions.
Second.
Just when you're ready.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes?
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Cook? Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Second public hearing, conditional use permit to allow personal care services of similar use at 8500 Station Street. Is that applicant here? You come over and identify yourself for the clerk, please. Give us a quick overview of what you'd like to do at that location.
Yes, hello, my name is David Yates, owner of Ammonite Tattoo LLC. I'm requesting or seeking the conditional use permit to offer tattooing services inside the Matchworks building, Station Street in Mentor.
Okay. Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak against? Okay, we'll close the public portion. Any comments from the administration?
Our comments are outlined in the staff report, so we're fine at this time.
Okay. Mr. Law Director? Law Director, if you could.
Assistant.
Assistant Law Director. But you are Law Director, and that's good.
I appreciate that.
So if you could enumerate the conditions from a conditional use permit, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, I didn't have the code open. Well, first, there's a foundational question for the commission as to whether or not the proposed use is similar to a permitted use in the district. And so that's a foundational question. If the commission cannot articulate what permitted use this proposal is similar to, then it doesn't, none of there are no conditions that you don't get that further into the inquiry. The use simply, CUP simply cannot issue. So that's the foundational question for the commission. In terms then of the bases for issuing a conditional use permit, again, if it does resolve that issue in favor of the applicant, then there are further conditions for the CUP. One is whether or not the character of the neighborhood or surrounding properties would be affected by granting of the CUP. So that's the harmony aspect of it. Will it adversely affect the health or safety of persons residing or working in the neighborhood? Will it change the character of the neighborhood? Will it be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property? Is it in accord with the purpose and intent of this chapter and the comprehensive plan of the city? And does it comply with any adopted policies related to such use? So again, that's an issue of compatibility of use. But again, if we're looking at the light manufacturing district and the enumerated permitted uses, warehousing and storage, wholesale trade, sale, service, and rental of agricultural and construction equipment, shops of tradesmen such as carpenters, plumbers, and upholsterers, offices, non-traditional retail, and then we get into the various CUP uses. So again, and tattoo artistry is not an enumerated permitted or an enumerated conditionally permitted use in the district. There's that catch-all provision, similar use. But again, it has to be similar to something, and so that's the initial inquiry for the
That was always the
commission.
magic question, similar to what?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Varga?
What other uses are in the building now that might be of our interest to us? Or, I don't know. Can I put the question to you? You're familiar with the building, right?
There are office space. The commission has issued uses for hair salon or hair care type of facility as personal services. There's an art gallery and an artist studio space in the building as well. There's a coffee shop. It was, of course, the site of a restaurant until its recent closure, but that space still exists, of course. And there's, I guess, what I would describe as odds and ends. There's everything from meeting spaces and I don't know that CUPs have issued for some of these uses in there, but there's like a yoga studio and some other things. So I'm not sure that everything in there has actually, received proper permitting, but those are some of the uses. It was reconstructed, of course, as an office building, and then there was the site of the restaurant has been there, I think, since its renovation from a purely industrial facility to the office conversion. And that was the case until relatively recently.
Well, my opinion is that it's not dissimilar from the personal care of a salon and has an artistic capacity to it, like the art gallery. I think it's close, and it's kind of a catch-all building. It's kind of interesting that way. Has there been any response from any of the other tenants that is a negative response?
I don't know that the tenants would have been notified of it specifically, although there would be a sign posted on the exterior of the unit. So the notice would have gone to adjacent property owners, not to tenants within the building.
Question. What are the adjacent uses in the building to that space? Do you know?
Immediately to the space?
Either immediately adjacent, next to or across the hall, or however it's
The
configured.
yoga studio is going in across the hall.
That's
Next door is another art studio, as well as the large art studio downstairs. And a jeweler at the salon, all on the same floor. Everyone I've spoke with is actually quite excited to get something of the nature of what I do in there.
Okay, thank you.
And just to be clear, the personal services issue is I'm not really sure where that's coming from, actually. It's not a, if we go through the CUPs, the available CUPs that are enumerated in the code for the M1 district, there's terminal facilities for motor freight transportation, not including truck stops, animal hospitals and kennels, automobile repair shops, recreational facilities, restaurants, traditional retail incidental to permitted M1 uses, truck rental facilities, child daycare, hotels and motels, sexually oriented businesses, other similar uses, outside dining and drinking, crematory, excavation, demolition, processing, et cetera, of earth substances, and commercial indoor firing ranges as well. So the concept of personal services is frankly a commission's creation.
I see, I see. Well, I was just going on the basis of a salon being personal services, but, and that's in the building.
And
I may, it's also how it's listed, under Ohio's code for vending license is a personal service.
Well, the fact that this is completely an internal issue to the building, I mean, it's in a building, but it has no exterior manifestation. It's not like it's not like he's building a building and doing tattooing out of the building and it sits in the public, area. I mean, does that have an effect on the nature of what we can approve and not approve?
It's immaterial. I mean,
Immaterial.
almost every use is inside four walls.
Well, no, that's not,
obviously.
I'm sorry, that's not what I meant, though. I mean, it's, yes, if he had a separate building, he would be inside four walls, but he's inside a building with a lot of other uses. It doesn't really have a big effect on the outside of the building because he doesn't have a separate entrance. He doesn't have,
If a tattoo studio is a potentially conditionally permitted use in M1 district, then it doesn't, then that analysis means that it would be potentially permitted everywhere in an M1 district, as opposed to where it's permitted as of right in the general business district.
So I have a question. Have we seen you before?
No, sir,
You've not been here before, the commission?
I have not.
Okay, thanks. So the Matchworks building is not a typical M1 building, right?
It was.
I mean, it was, but it's not, no longer. as such.
But I wouldn't, just by virtue of the fact that tenants are being brought in with a variety of uses doesn't change the district regulations, and nor does the code conform to what people necessarily feel is best.
Well,
It was constructed as a manufacturing facility. It was reimaged as an office building, and also houses a restaurant. And if the goal is to take the M1 district and modify the district regulations such that it can be a mall, well, that's a code change, and to do it by invention is not appropriate.
I guess my point was that it's not a typical building as we picture an M1 building to be, and it's not a typical building when you talked about truck terminals and body shops and that type of CUP type designation. To me, that's what an M1 district is. If you put those CUPs in that kind of a district, this building does not look like a typical M1 building, and I realize it's zoned that way because of what it was at one time. But it seems to me that a tattoo place is inappropriate for that type of operation.
Well, again, it is a permitted use in the city, just not in an M1 district.
Right.
And at some point, frankly, I have cautioned the commission in the past relative to similar uses and stretching that concept to the point where we're effectively rewriting the district regulations. And this is another one of those instances.
based on the commentary you just made, it would also suggest that many of the, and you kind of alluded to this, many of the other uses in that building today are not part of an M1 use.
Well, I don't recall, a recreational facility, for example, could be permitted with a CUP. So to the extent there's a suggestion that a yoga studio may locate there, they should make appropriate application. But recreational facilities, you can issue a CUP for that, if that's what a yoga studio, I think that's the way it's been handled in the past. So.
What about a beauty salon?
The Planning Commission did approve, initially it located without having pulled any proper zoning permits. The Planning Commission did review that. The Planning Commission had established precedent elsewhere in the industrial districts that a salon was a similar use. frankly, I disagreed with that determination back then, and I would disagree with it today. I think that's rewriting the district regulations.
To your question, Mr. Varga, we did do a review of the occupants within the building and compared it to the permits that have been pulled to date. They would either have been pulled either by a conditional use permit for some of these unique uses, if you will, or through a reoccupancy permit, unless they were an office use. And as it explained to me by the building department, when you go from office to office, they don't require a REOC for those. So there are a handful that did go through the reoccupancy permit process and a couple that went through the CUP process. But there are others, and some that have been there quite some time, that we did not have record of the any permit. So it is a little inconsistent. The other issue, I guess the only other issue to raise, which was brought up by the police department, is all tattoo parlors shall comply with Chapter 761 of the Mentor Code of Ordinances, which is under our business code. And that pertains to the unit itself. And so that was one of the conditions that we pointed out that needed to be met if this was going to be approved.
I'm a little stymied, that's all. The building is not your typical building in any way, in any district, in any zoning district. It's kind of a hybrid.
Chair, I believe the hair salon, by the hair salon being an allowed use there, and it seems like it's gone through the appropriate CUP, I would compare a tattoo studio and what they do as similar to that. So I don't see an issue there. I get it with these other businesses that are in the building, but just by virtue of the hair salon alone, I'm comfortable that a tattoo parlor is similar.
Well, again, the hair salon was allowed as a similar use pursuant to a CUP. So you can't have uses similar to a similar
No,
use.
I guess my point is, if a hair salon is viewed as a similar use, I view a tattoo studio the same way as a similar use.
And I understand that.
Okay.
I understand now, Mr. Cicero. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sidoti?
I was struggling with this similar use issue also because I didn't want to get involved where we voted on something and it turns out to be a stretch, a big stretch. So I went to the facility yesterday and I toured it. I just walked in, I went all 3 floors. And I talked to a tenant on the 3rd floor, and he came up to me and wanted to know if I needed any help. And I told him who I was and what I was doing. And they're in the project management construction business. And they said they welcome, this kind of a service in the building. Because the way they see it is they want to see people coming and going from this facility. They think that's what's going to keep the vitality going of that building. They were bummed out that the restaurant closed because a lot of those businesses, according to this gentleman, they used to take their clients there for lunch or for drinks after work and so on and so forth. And I saw there's an art studio on the 1st floor, and I guess there's an art studio. I thought I saw one on the 2nd floor, not as big as the one on the 1st floor. And then you got the hairdresser and you got all these other odds and ends. And, tattooing is an art. It's an art form. People will argue that. And you're by appointment only, correct?
Yeah, that
Okay.
can be arranged. Yeah.
I looked at it, whereas this could be a fit in this particular building at that particular space. You're only talking 250 square feet. And, if the management of that building properly polices the lease agreement between you and them, I think it can work. And I also I think it is a similar use to what's being offered in there now. Especially you got the art facilities in there, the art studios. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome. Any other comments from the administration? Any other comments, questions from the commission? Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion with the 5 conditions.
I'll second.
Yes?
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
No.
You.
So you're all set.
Very much.
Third item, conditional use permit to allow vehicle servicing at 8807 and 8819 Menor Avenue. Identify yourself for the clerk, please.
My name is Todd Mosher. I'm with R.A. Smith. Applicants on behalf of the property owners and the proposed discount tire store.
Review of what you're going to do there.
Sure. Well, just for the CUP, Discount Tire is a tire dealer. We were before you here 3 or 4 months ago, looking at redeveloping the old pizza restaurant. Store hours are Monday through Friday from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the evening. Saturday is 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Closes an hour earlier, and then they're closed on Sunday. It's a relatively low traffic generation use. Discount Tire is a tire dealer. They sell many different brands of tires. They also offer the installation of the tires and wheels as well. On this property, we've now combined the adjacent property, and we've come back with a revised plan for your consideration. The additional property was formerly a car wash, a self-service car wash, as I understand it. It's vacant currently. It's a smaller property, but the combination of the two property affords us more room for the delivery access to the store, which was one of the issues on the prior petition, as well as enough parking spaces to support the business adequately. About 11,000 square foot building altogether. It's completely masonry built. The plan that we have before you this evening, what we've done is we've consolidated really 3 access points to the car wash and the restaurant into one single point of access to Mentor Avenue. We've also decreased the amount of impervious area fairly significantly. I think roughly it's a little over 12,000 square feet of additional landscape area on the property compared to what it is today. Of course, we're consolidating the 2 parcels together, or we will consolidate the 2 parcels together. I think on its own, the car wash parcel is fairly small in size and kind of an unusual configuration. It'd be on its own tough to redevelop, probably. Limited uses could go in there, so by combining these into one business sort of solves that potential issue. I've read through the staff report and the recommended conditions at the end under the CUP, and we have no issues with the recommended conditions for the CUP. And then there was one condition under the site plan, preliminary site plan.
What we're talking about now is just the CUP for the operation.
CUP, okay.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak against? Identify yourself for the clerk, please. Up here, yes.
Hi, I'm Paul Filchuk, 8812 Dogwood Lane, immediately behind both of those said properties. And long-term Mentor resident, 50 years, 20 years on this property. I have seen restaurants come and go on this property. And I don't know, have you been to the property lately? It looks like a war zone. It looks like a dumping ground. So I do want something to be successful there, but I have concerns about a auto retail and auto servicing shop in that area. And my reasons are probably 6 in nature, and I can go over them. Detailed noise, visuals, trash, resale value impact, environmental impact, noise, once again, air quality, odor from tires and other servicing things, and traffic and congestion. Those are my 6 points, and I was reading the general B2 district statement of purpose, and I would argue that this purpose does not meet the manifest that is laid out. Purpose of this district shall be to provide sufficient space for a variety of business activities in locations adequately serviced by highways and other facilities. Once again, this references the traffic congestion. This is why none of those restaurants have been successful. I've been to all of them, and they all told me the same thing. Traffic, entrance, and egress problems. And two, more importantly, to provide such locations in a manner to minimize negative impacts on other districts. I would argue that this does not.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak against? Okay, we'll close the public portion. Any comments from the administration?
Not with relative to the CUP, no.
Sir, if you could step back forward. So, you got sufficient, you'll have an area for sufficient buffering, right?
We do indeed, yeah. We're respecting the required buffers between the districts.
How about the gentleman's question about the condition of the property? Fencing needs to be addressed.
Yeah, if I may, the fence is old, it's decrepit, it's falling apart.
If you're gonna speak, I need you to come back to the microphone because this is taped.
Can I now or wait?
Sure, you can come on back.
Yeah, on the fence portion, there is a fence there, it's falling apart, there's big holes in it, boards coming loose, and it's leaning in half apart and falling apart in certain areas. The
Okay.
existing fence, basic wooden fence, not very high, so it doesn't do a good job of noise abatement or sight blocking.
Okay, thanks. So you'll address those concerns.
Yeah, so there's an existing combination of masonry wall and fence on the property now. The wall itself is about 6.5 feet tall. The fencing is about 8 feet tall, and we would agree that the fencing has seen better days. It needs to be either replaced or refinished, which we would plan to do. So we're going to keep the existing fence buffer that's there in place, but we're going to redo
Yeah,
it.
it's right there.
And then you'll also have some landscaping that'll go in.
Between where our property has adjacency to residential property, and I don't know the exact location of this gentleman's property, but we have a 25-foot landscape buffer zone between the property line and our parking areas, and then it'll be fully landscaped. I think we have 20 trees and a bunch of, it's on the plan, but it's like a forest. Yeah.
Commissioners, questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sidoti?
we did receive a letter of opposition from Mr. Palante at 8808 Dogwood. I think that should be noted for the record.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there are some issues with regard to the fence that we've addressed in the preliminary plan. We'd like to continue to, I guess, still acknowledge, I know it was talked about briefly here, but I think the existing site plan does show that the current fence is 6 feet high. So that is one issue to be addressed, but we have that under the next part.
Okay. So would you feel more comfortable addressing it now or addressing it under the site plan?
Your call.
No, your call.
Well, I guess if it's already on the table, it is a 6-foot fence, and the buffer requirement is
All right.
8 feet. So it depends on if you want him to come back at the final plan process to request a reduction of that fence height.
So, but you indicated that the fence is in such a sad state of repair that you're gonna have to make repairs to it. So if you're gonna make repairs to it, why not just go to the 8 foot?
We'd be happy to do so. There was a typo on the drawing. It says 6-foot existing fence. It actually is an 8-foot fence. But we will replace it with an 8-foot fence if we can't fix it.
It is not an 8-foot fence. I just took pictures of it this evening and I stood.
Well,
and
we're
it was-
not, we're not gonna argue about the height of the fence. I
Well,
mean,
it's-
they're
it's an
gonna
issue.
have to make it an 8-foot fence, and they know that. So that'll be a concern that we can address.
So we will agree to the 8-foot fence.
And you-
We don't have an issue with that as a condition.
And you'll clear up anything that needs to be repaired or whatever on the fencing.
Exactly, yep.
Okay.
All the fencing, the buffer, and in our buffer zones adjacent to the residential zones, we will take care
You'll
of.
take care of it. Okay. Now, the gentleman also brought up a thing about trash. How do we control the trash that may exist on the property?
Okay, yeah, I'd like to address that. So we do have a separate trash enclosure on the property. It's masonry built. The materials will match the building. It'll have metal locking gates on it. It's roughly 6 feet high. It'll have the containers in there. We have one container for recycled materials and one for, normal trash. As it relates to used tires, which is a question that sometimes comes up, there's actually room inside the building that's designated for the used tires, and they're picked up on a regular basis, maybe once a week or so, for recycling. So all the trash is, whether it's either in the enclosure or the tires are stored within the building, so there's not going to be any trash out in the parking lot.
Chairman, can I ask?
Mr.
I just
Varga.
want a refinement of or additional information. Do you store any used tires other than inside the building? Okay, so all the used tires will be in the building. Your other trash will go into the trash receptacles. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go right ahead, Mr.
are the doors always closed when you're changing the tires?
No, they're not always closed. Different times of year. We move the cars in and out so quickly, it's practically impossible to keep them closed all the time. But again, if your concern is regarding noise, potentially, we have the newer technology on the equipment. It's not the old high screen pitch tools. They're the lower density compressed tools, so the noise, we will abide by the noise ordinance. There won't be anything audible, over exceeding the limit of the noise ordinance.
So is your service area air conditioned?
No.
No?
You have infrared heating in there for the wintertime?
But in the summer, it's not AC'd? Okay.
Yeah, in the showroom part it is, but not in the
Not in the
installation.
service area. Sometimes where they have AC in the service area, it's easy to keep the doors closed because you don't want the coolant to escape.
Right. No, it's not in that area.
Right. Commissioners, questions?
Chair,
Right ahead.
first, I appreciate you getting the second plot, because that was the big issue last time. Last time, we had an issue with how deliveries were going to happen. Can you just show on this drawing, with the additional space, how deliveries will come in and out, and, talk about the size of the vehicle that's doing the deliveries?
Yeah, essentially, it's a semi-truck delivery. They'll come in at the one entrance point. They'll make that immediate right turn before that interior landscape island, and we've got the aisle widened out there near the building so that the truck has room to sort of swing through there. And then the loading area where they'll take deliveries is in that the northwest corner of the building. So the truck will basically almost make a U-turn in the back of the parking lot, back up against the building. The tires are rolled off into the building and staged inside, and then the truck would just then continue to make its way around, and using the western aisle of the parking lot, he would leave going back out to Mentor Avenue. So it just basically makes a loop or an oval.
So you bring the tire, excuse me,
Right ahead.
Mr. Chairman, you bring the tires, new tire delivery also into the area that's called dead tire storage? You bring it in through that door and then bring it into the building?
It's in that, right, there's
There's an overhead door.
There's an small overhead door there.
Right. And then, so that's the delivery point, okay.
Yep.
How many deliveries a week do you receive?
2 to 3.
Reversed.
Okay. And you know the hours that they can deliver?
We only deliver during store hours, so it's be somewhere between 8 o'clock and 6 p.m.
Okay. That's fine, right? Okay. Anything else, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sidoti?
The car wash parcel, is that under option, or have you consummated the purchase of that property?
Both properties are under contract,
Under contract?
so we have not.
Contingent upon receiving the proper approvals from the city? Okay. Ms. Mitchell, the applicant has testified that that fence is 8 feet, and he's either going to attempt to restore it or replace it, but meet the code requirement of 8 feet. If he attempts to incorporate that with the existing masonry, it's his testimony that the walls are only 6.5 feet. He wouldn't be in total compliance then, would he?
I'm just looking as to where precisely the wall is.
It's along the rear.
In the corner where the diagonal
Oh,
is.
so it's primarily fenced
That's
though.
wall.
Yeah, so, and we had gone out the first time around and looked at that fence. The brick, the piers to the fence are brick. So I don't know what the intent is of the applicant in terms of those repairs, but I would think that the fencing that's required in the code for the buffer is 8 feet. So whether it be a fence or a wall, it should be 8 feet.
All right, so I heard you say that that wall is 6.5 feet.
Right.
And you want to keep it there, incorporate the fence with it, correct?
Well, we haven't gotten to the preliminary site plan portion of the agenda, but I intended to talk a little bit about that at that point in time. But the fence portions that are there now, our intention is to keep them at 8 feet if they aren't already at 8 feet.
Right.
Okay. The brick portions, because the brick is actually a fairly nice masonry wall that's there now.
That's why I
We
raised
prefer
it.
not to remove it and replace it with wood fence. We think that the masonry solid on its own, and it's been there.
You can add to it.
And like I said, I intended to talk a little bit about it later. I know the condition was that if we wanted to change it from 8 feet to something less than 8 feet, we'd have to apply for another conditional use permit. I don't think we want to go that route. So we could tag on something on top of the wall to get it elevated another 18 inches in those wall sections. Or we can remove the masonry and just make the whole thing a wood fence at 8 feet.
That's what I was getting at. Do you agree with him? Because if that wall is only 6.5 feet, and he's incorporating the 8-foot fence, whether restored or new, he's still not in total compliance if that wall is not 8 foot.
And I agree, I mean, something could be added to the wall.
Right.
There were, when we had inspected it, there were sections that were in decent shape, so it was just a matter of maintenance of the wall. So if he wanted to either add to it, or as he's indicated, remove entirely and then put an 8-foot fence in, that's fine, as long as the 8 foot is met.
Right, okay, I agree.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
I did. I was going to eliminate on the fence issue. There is only this very small portion that is brick. That's the part that's immediately behind the restaurant. The whole rest of it that goes this way and then around the whole one perimeter of the car wash site is all wood, and it's falling apart wood. As I said, it's not 8 foot. It's a very bad shape.
That's business.
I think I might know what the disconnect is. There is another fence that's not our fence. There's a residential fence that's actually adjacent to our neighbor's property, a property that we're not under contract with. The building has I don't know the address, but the building has like a dentist office in it and a photography studio in it.
That's correct, but they run together though into the fence that goes around to meet up to this brick wall.
Yeah.
It's all the same.
Mr. Chairman,
So the fence,
I need
the
you
fence
to
that
get
he
the
may be
microphone if you're
referring
gonna
to
talk.
is on the residential property or on that other property. It's not our fence, nor are we directly adjacent to that
It's
fence.
both. It connects around and back to the same, it's the same fence, and it goes into the small section of the brick fence.
yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Varga?
I'm looking at the map, the overhead, and I understand that what both of you are talking about. And the applicant is only responsible for the section of fence that runs immediately behind the existing restaurant, because his property no longer continues along to the north. That's a different property. That fence is someone else's responsibility. But we have it, well, we can't see it right
I think a part of it is, right, a part of it is definitely
Well,
behind
to the
where
corner.
the car wash was.
To the corner. The car wash property doesn't
That's
go
right,
all the way to the corner.
that's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I just want to clarify that, Jim.
Okay, anything else with regard to the CUP?
This is his property.
If not, I'll entertain a
This is somebody
motion.
else's property. This here, he's
Anyone at all?
Motion to approve with 4 conditions.
Second.
Yes, when you're ready.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. Okay, we'll see you in a bit. Informal rezoning of 3.51 acres from R4 Single Family Residential to B2 General Business by Viviani Properties. That's going to be withdrawn, is that correct?
Yes.
I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to dismiss without prejudice item number 4 in tonight's planning commission.
Let's take it off the table first.
Motion to remove from the table.
Second.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. Now, Mr. Sidoti.
Motion to dismiss without prejudice item number 4 in tonight's planning commission agenda.
Second.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Cook? Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. Minor subdivision to adjust the property line between two parcels at 6121 Brownstone. I see that applicant is here, so I'll entertain a motion to remove it from the table.
Moved.
Second.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. Go right ahead.
I'm sorry, oh,
All we did was take it off the table.
okay. Gotcha, all right.
You had the look on your face like, what are they doing?
Wasn't quite sure, right, thank you. Again, hello, I'm Debbie, this is my husband David, and again, we're looking to purchase this piece of property. One of the questions that came at the last meeting was the drainage, and to contact engineering to see if they had any input as to how to resolve the drainage issues. And I did speak with Tim
McParlin.
McParlin, thank you. And in which he relayed the information over to Kathy Mitchell, that grading could be done. And did you've all received a copy of that letter?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And also in Kathy's letter, it had said, as long as the adjoining property owner has no objections. I also included a email between the property owner and myself, that she is okay with the purchase of the property. And I hope that you all receive that as well.
We're good. So continue.
Okay. And so I guess I would just like to hear your thoughts on entertaining me purchasing that portion of property, not only to fix the drainage issues, but to also give my property a little extra room in the backyard.
Mrs. Mitchell, anything from the administration?
I did have a follow-up conversation with Mr. McParland. He's been out there on other lots, in addition to having this conversation with the applicant, indicated that there are a lot of wet areas in that area. So it's somewhat unavoidable. And he agreed that the grading of that section of property was probably the best option in terms of trying to improve the wet conditions of the site. And I guess in light of that information, and the fact that the adjoining property owner does not have objections to it, while we don't normally recommend creating a non-conforming lot, the fact that they're not using it and this particular owner is maintaining it and needs to further maintain it in order to eliminate some of the water issues on the site, we didn't object to this request.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant or the administration?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Varga?
I know that when we passed the CUP just a minute ago, you're not that happy with us doing that, but but here's a case where this action will also create non-conforming situations. Are we establishing any kind of precedent by solving this problem this way?
This is really a very specific set of circumstances, and while I'm always concerned with precedent, it's hard to compare one parcel of property in one location to another parcel in another location. So while I appreciate the caution, I don't really think that this establishes any precedent that would be applicable outside of these specific conditions.
That's an answer to my question. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
A motion for approval.
Second?
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. You're set. Get the water wings out. Get the water wings out. The new business, preliminary site plan of a retail, okay, Discount Tires back in the barrel.
Say my name again.
Sure.
Todd Bosier, R.A. Smith. So for the preliminary site plan, as I alluded to earlier, we're consolidating the parcels into one redevelopment for the tire store. We're decreasing the impervious area by over 12,000 square feet. We're adding 30 or more trees to the property, maintaining the required buffer between the residential zoning and our area. Low traffic generation, consolidating into one entrance. We've worked out the circulation for the truck. We've also been able to maintain, similarly to our initial application, between the building and the street is all landscaping. We're moving, right now the pizza place has a parking lot, directly off the sidewalk there between the building and the street. The building has a nicer presence with the landscape material, directly in front of the building without being interrupted by the parking lot. So we've moved the parking lot off to the side of the building. And I think in terms of the recommended conditions in the staff report, condition number 3 was asking, or recommending that we integral color CMU or split face block in the areas where we were showing it as being painted. For the most part, our building is very visible from Mentor Avenue, obviously. That facade of the building only has roughly 15% of this painted material on it. Everything else is either glass or integral color already. And, the other, I guess I'll say the east side of the building faces the building next door, which is, I think, a vinyl-sided building, and the back of the building is faces the parking lot for the dentist office, not really publicly visible. And then the west side of the building, which faces the parking lot, also has a very minimal amount of this painted surface because a lot of that side of the building is either glass or the pre-finished overhead doors, or again, more other integral color on the building.
So let me ask you a question. Would you agree that by turning the building such that you turned it, that the back of the building is now a side of a building? The east wall. It's not a traditional back of the building, it's now a side of a building.
You're talking about the long side.
I'm talking about the long
The
side.
east side?
The east
of the
side.
building? Yeah, the east side is not, well, it's not very visible because it's 20 or 30 feet away from the building next door.
Right.
So
So,
we still have upgraded that side of the building quite a bit, though. We've added a
Yes.
lot of articulation there and a lot of other details, and we still maintain the cornice work on that side of the building. It's just the painted material that we have proposed, especially like on the front of the building. What we're trying to avoid is, we've had a problem with some of our buildings lately where the block has this white, when we do an integral color, it has this white,
Effervescence.
thank you.
can you tell he's an architect?
Yeah, and so it's, by painting the building, it seals it better. I mean, there's sealants you can use on the integral color, but it still allows it to breathe, and it still allows this oozing of this. And so it's a lot easier for us to keep the building looking nice if it's a painted material, because we, number one, don't have that issue. And then if the building has a nick in it or something happens to the building, it's easily repairable, where the integral block doesn't allow us to do repairs without using paint. So,
Ms. Mitchell, any comments from the administration with regard, since you're the ones that posed the subject?
With regard to the paint, it was just, past practices of the commission.
We'd like to see more of a definite finished material there than a painted block. So you can do that, right?
the part of the conditions that I was resisting was just where we have painted block, which, like I said, on the front is less than 15% of the building facade. It's a minor amount of material. We'd like to use paint as proposed versus converting it to integral color. And
Since it is such a small percentage, why can't you convert it?
it's not a money thing, it's just, it's a maintenance issue. I mean, we don't want the oozing. We just feel like the paint's gonna be a better looking end product for everybody concerned.
Well, my personal feeling is I'd like to see the recommendation of the administration followed through on. But what's your feeling?
Well, the issue with the...
Resident architect.
Yeah, I know. The issue with the effervescence is because of the way the mason put the material up, and it's the salts and the materials that leach out. And so if the right mortars are used and the right techniques are used, you don't have that problem. It does show up, though, in a lot of places if it's not done correctly. Also, is this a single wide building? Is the block that's on the outside the same as the same piece of masonry that's on the inside?
It is.
That's where the problem comes from, because you have moisture migrating from inside the building directly through. If, I don't want to solve, I'm not practicing right now at the minute, but if you put a sealer on the inside of the building and sealed that wall with the paint or, the correct material, I'm not telling you what it is, then you won't have the moisture moving through the wall, then you won't get that effect on the outside. You just have to stop the moisture from going through the wall. So in that case, you could use solid material, colored solid material, and you won't have that problem, but you should talk to an architect about that problem, and I think he can solve it for you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good.
Good. So, any comments back?
It was just something I wanted some consideration on. I'll leave it up to the commission to
Okay.
determine whether or not that could be deleted or if it stays in for the final.
I
site
think
plan.
we'd like to see it stay, right? That's your feeling?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have some other comments.
Right ahead.
You got the word, I don't know how you got it, but you got the word, you're showing all the mechanical units dotted in on the drawings, and they're all below the parapet height, and you're doing it on all four sides. I can't be happier. Because that's what we want, right? So even though you have, a back or, you're shielding that also from the view from the residential areas, and I think that's a good thing. And I want to give you credit for buying the other piece of property, or buying and bringing in, addressing the issues we brought it forward and coming up with another plan. And I think we should maintain the requirement for solid color material, because that's the standard that we all would like to see. So you talk it over with your guys and see how you feel about that. There is one piece of equipment, however, that I am a little concerned about. You have a electrical switchgear cabinet on the outside of the building. It's dotted in, but I know what that looks like, and I don't want to see that either. So you can either find a way to put it in the building, which is maybe more problematic for you, or put something around it so we don't see it. Shield it from view. It's just it's the same issue with the equipment on the roof. I don't want to see a piece of mechanical or electrical equipment sitting on the outside of the building to appreciate the architectural appearance of the building. So that would be something I would require, or would request that we do.
Okay? Yep. Under the landscaping.
Yep.
I brought it up at the last meeting for a different applicant, but Mentor used to be the rose capital of America. So I'd like to see some roses as put into the landscape criteria.
Okay, I'll make a note of that.
Thank you.
The lady there's raising
Right.
her hand.
What?
What?
Mr. Chairman, I just would like to point out, there were 2 items in the recommendations within the staff report that weren't listed as conditions that I wanted to point out, and I would like the commission to consider as conditions as well.
Go right ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
First off, in the parking analysis, one of the items, and again, I'll just echo the sentiments, we're very pleased with the expansion, so we don't have objections to the project. We did want to address the increased number of parking. Obviously, when the proposal first came to us, it was on a smaller site, so there wasn't as much parking anyway. Now we've increased it substantially to have 48 parking spaces. That's well beyond the maximum required. So it was our recommendation, after we discussed it at length internally, we'd like to see the front parking spaces, the majority of them, if not all, removed, or unless the applicant can justify why there's a need for 48 parking spaces for this particular use. Obviously, the addition of more landscaping in the front is always desired if we can have it. I see that there's 2 handicap spaces. Maybe those can be kept, because of their proximity to the building, but are all of the other spaces necessary? And that's what we are asking at this point.
48 parking spaces.
I can address this. We will use most, if not all, of those spaces, and here's why. This business has 15 to 20 employees. On a maximum shift, it's probably 15, and then there's some overlap where they're both there at the same time. So we need at least 15 parking spots, if not more, just for the employees itself. The nature of this business is there's a lot of people that will make appointments. They'll come in and they'll have somebody follow them, and they leave their car for a good part of the day, either all morning or all day. And so we have to find a place to put these vehicles while they're off to work or wherever they're going. In addition to that, we have the tire air checks, and we have people just stopping in routinely for an estimate, and then we have other just regular appointments where people are waiting for their cars. So the combination of the employees and the cars that are left there during the entire day, and just the normal course of business, we're going to use the majority of those parking spaces.
So you need them, is what you're saying, you need them.
Yeah, the ITE, so I saw that comment in the staff report, and I was happy to see it wasn't a condition of approval. But I did talk to our traffic engineer, and he looked up the ITE, our tire store is ITE code number 848, land use 848. And in the ITE, it recommends 4.2 vehicles per 1,000 square feet for this facility. We're about 11,000 square feet. So rough math is about 46 spaces is what ITE would say. We have 48 on the drawing right now. We think we would use the majority of those spaces, and those spaces in the front of the building are actually our most valuable spaces. They're spaces with the least amount of conflict with cars backing in and out of the parking bays. Those are the ones we like to reserve for customers especially, because they're near the front door. And as I said before, we're adding 12,000 square feet of additional landscape to the property already. And I feel like we'd like to further enhance it if we could. We feel like we'd like to have the parking that we feel like we need.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, don't let me cut. Not about this subject, so finish.
Oh, okay. I guess in response to that, so in looking at the site, you have along the western boundary, you have 15 spaces, which presumably would be reserved because of the further spaces for employees. And within the center, you have 25 spaces. The ratios that we used took into consideration, we had this discussion with our chief building official, because the second floor is mezzanine, it's just storage. So you're not going to have additional retail space upstairs. So when you actually factor in the floor area of the main building, of the main floor, that's what the calculation was based on, which is why we came up with a more conservative number. And I mean, I hear what the applicant's saying. It just seems hard to believe that 48 spaces are going to be needed for this particular use. We have other uses of like this in the city, and I don't know that there is as many spaces. I guess the similar instance when you go to, say, for example, to get your car maintenance or serviced at a car dealership, you have somebody drop you off there and pick up. So there is that exchange that goes on. It just seems like an awful lot of spaces. And the code says that you can vary and exceed that maximum amount, but it would also be beneficial to have some sort of evidence that there is an actual need for that many spaces.
How do you answer that question of no,
I think the
mezzanine
evidence-
is not an active work area?
Well, I think part of the evidence is the ITE is a fairly well-respected document, and if they're saying 4.2 and we're almost 11,000 feet.
Yeah, but again, your 11,000 feet encompasses the mezzanine, does it not?
Yes, but that's considered floor area. I don't know if the ITE, if the buildings that they surveyed in the ITE for that land use have
What
mezzanines as well.
what if we land bank that? Would that work?
Certainly.
But can I make a statement?
Go right ahead.
I don't mean to be argumentative with the city. We kind of push these people into buying more land. We usually complain when most people show up and they don't have enough parking. Now we're trying to keep them from using the land we just required them to get. I have a feeling like, they have less impervious surface than the previous users. If that's what they say they need, I don't think I have a problem with that, all balancing those issues.
What if we land banked it?
Well, that means, what that means is that we would provisionally have the plan, but you wouldn't pave it unless you really realized you needed to use it, and then the discussion would be later with the city to pave those areas.
We've done that before. We just got done doing a parking lot expansion in Eagan, Minnesota. Same thing happened. 2 years later, we've got people parking on the street, go back to the city, they allow us to do it. Costs us a lot of money to go back in there and to go back in and add, 5 or 10 more parking spots.
My original comment is we've already kind of backed them into buying both properties, and now we're saying, well, we don't want you to use all of it, so I don't know. I kind of feel that if they say they need it, and it's less pervious surface than before, I don't know that I have a problem with this case.
Just out of curiosity, what's Firestone's parking ratio on that new building that they just built? Do you have any idea off the top of your
You know what,
head?
I'm sorry, I don't have that.
I'm just curious. We're using examples of other
Yeah.
retailers.
Mr.
I know,
Chairman?
go ahead.
So this is preliminary, and to the extent the commission wants to sort of, as Mr. Varga indicated, sort of provisionally approve it, subject to further review on final. I think basically if there's some further real-world data that can be brought to bear, as the commission is now inquiring, that would be a appropriate discussion for final. But
Is that okay
again,
with
if
you?
it's
Okay with me.
Make a motion.
So we're going to make a motion to approve with, I got to go look now and see.
Do you have a comment? Go right ahead.
As I mentioned earlier, and I don't mean to belabor this, but we had another comment, and that was there were 2 sidewalks proposed, and which was
yeah.
questioned internally as to why there was a need for 2 sidewalks. They're extending pretty far out,
Yeah,
so I guess it's a question for the applicant. And it wasn't a listed condition, so.
I can address that. We could remove one of the sidewalks.
The one further to the east, it doesn't change anything.
I think so. There was also some comments in there regarding landscaping in front, which we're happy, and on the east side, which we're happy to correct.
And you'll do some rose bushes. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So we've got 9 conditions total.
Well, 5 plus the sidewalk, so 6.
Oh, okay, this is right,
Plus
this
your
is just a
switch
site
gear.
plan, I'm sorry, the site, so it'd be 6 then.
Is your
about your
electric box
switchgear?
also the electric switch one?
Electric box.
That's a condition too, to enclose that with appropriate architectural materials for final review.
Can we use landscaping too?
No, because landscaping goes away, and then we see the equipment. I want to see something physical, just like we ask for the parapets to block the equipment. I'd like to see something permanent around that. Figure out with your architect, what's the appropriate surround, okay?
Jess, do you have a second?
So that would be the 6th
Do you have a second?
condition. Or
Seven.
7th, I'm sorry, that's the 7th condition. So, proposed to approve with 7 conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
You're ready.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. You're all set.
Thank you.
Thanks for working that out with the 2 lots. Final subdivision of 21 residential lots, Becker Avenue and Lakeshore Boulevard. Brought the attorney this time, that's good.
Good evening. Mr. Novak is here as well. For the record, my name is Eric Walter. I have the red sheet filled out that I will leave. One of the attorneys at Dworkin and Bernstein. I had the chance to meet with our legal counsel and city engineer. We would like this to move forward, but condition number 2, I just don't, in our opinion, find any support legally or through the zoning ordinances of the city that would require our client to redevelop basically an entire dedicated roadway. I rely on the cases that we cited in our initial review. I think what's important to note is when this was originally plotted, there were 32 houses. I went last week and drove by, I counted 8. The staff review says there's 10 that are currently on the east side. Our proposal is for 21 houses. So if you take 21 and 10, you're still at the 31 level. And when this was originally plotted for 32 homes, we're still under. We'd be 31 with our proposal. Our position still is, we want this to go forward, but I don't know of any legal precedent or case law or statutory law that would support having a dedicated road be reconstructed or redeveloped by a developer. This isn't as if, I'm told that it's kind of, the analysis that's being used is it's but for impact, the special impact but for the subdivision. That's not the case. This was originally plotted for 32 homes. Now, if this ever gets on the east side developed above the 32, and you include the 21 houses that we're proposing, plus the 10 that are there, and then you go over 32, maybe that comes into play. But this is not unique to the development that's being proposed by the applicant. And so, just so we're clear, I don't think sections 1115.03, 1117.02, or 907.01 of the ordinances, and I should clarify that 907.01 means street cleaning. Obviously, if there's debris or something on the street, but our client, I believe, Mr. Novak's here if you want to address it, we're not planning to use that road for construction equipment. Almost all of the construction equipment is going to be on the lots themselves. And the case that I'd cited and brought to Mr. Seisman's attention was the R.G. Dunbar Incorporated versus Toledo Planning Commission case. I think that is dispositive on this issue, where developers cannot be made to a dedicated road to be forced to reconstruct this road. I think if you look at your Mentor codes, when it talks about roads, it says to the design and construction of a road. That road is already there. Nobody, the engineer seems to have an issue with, we don't know what's under it. The staff recommendations say that it's in fair condition. I'm not sure that we're going to overuse this road from its intended purpose. So that is our position. We want this to go forward. I just don't know that there's any legal precedent. I don't know of any in the city of Mentor that has ever required a developer to redo a road. I know there's been thrown out the commercial settings. That's a different caliber. This is a dedicated road that's already there. And to require a developer, you talk about precedent, to require a developer to redo a road that's existing, I just don't think there's any precedent that would allow for that. So we're for this, except condition number 2 is causing a lot of consternation because I just don't know of any legal precedent that would allow that to be a condition on the plans. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
I guess a clarification on item number 2. This was discussed as well with the administration. The language indicates the entire length of Becker Avenue shall be reconstructed or improved. So emphasis on the word or, improved. I think the city is at least looking for an attempt by the applicant to show the condition of the road by way of testing through, maybe some borings and indicate what they feel is sufficient. Are they satisfied with the road as it currently exists to then add 21 houses and then market those 21 houses with the road as it exists today? And that hasn't been presented at this point.
Can I ask a question?
Go right ahead.
Can the city be more specific about what they feel is the technical issues that make the road less than standard? When you say improve, so I'm thinking, well, in what ways could they improve the road and meet your expectations?
Width is a major issue. That's self-evident. Just put up an aerial. That's actually the parcel outlined in blue, and you can see it extends all the way into the center of the marsh. It's a heck of a parcel. If you're interested in buying an acre in the middle of the marsh, have at it. This is an old platted area there. This goes back to probably the 20s, back when it was township, and platting back there was pretty much the Wild West. They were just doing whatever they wanted. Why are there 1 acre parcels in the middle of a marsh? Again, environmental. That's correct. So maybe someone down in Florida was interested in some nice Ohio land. But just go back to the times and what was, the environmental protection wasn't really much of a thought back then, although certainly there were conservation-minded people back then. You could imagine the expectation that this would have been, drained or who knows. There was, we tend to look at these things through modern eyes, and obviously the intent back when this was platted, many, almost 100 years ago, was very different. Becker is pretty much an access drive. As you can see from the aerial, I know probably have to zoom in even more. None of the properties on the east, what I should refer to as the lands on the east, much of that is now the Marshview development. It does not have access onto Becker, and that was intentional. Becker is not going to support that much traffic. A lot of those parcels up there are underwater. They're non-developable. And so really the end of the development would be where the proposed cul-de-sac would be. Once you get past that, you're pretty much underwater or in the muck. So the idea that further development is going to ever occur on the eastern side of Becker is it's just not going to happen. So what we're looking at is this subdivision of this existing very, very long parcel. And that's where we're trying to convey to the applicant that the city has, there's no public interest. The people of Mentor writ large have no public interest in improving Becker. It functions just fine to service the limited number of households that currently are there. The only thing that would require, from the city's perspective, improvements to Becker to get up to adequate service levels is this subdivision. Just like in order to have this subdivision, they have to put in stormwater management. They have to put in the retention. They have to upgrade some of the utilities, the grading. Everything about this subdivision has to comply with current city standards. And we've got, yes, a dedicated public road, but that public road was never intended to support development of this nature. It just wasn't. We can't go back, the better part of 100 years and flash forward and reach that type of conclusion. So the question is that we're confronted with is, should the public ultimately have to bear the burden of this private development? And that's where the city's position obviously is at a significant variance from that of the applicant. They are going to change Becker in some way. They want to add to the end of it a cul-de-sac. They're requesting the city accept that as dedicated public street. And so there is aspects of this that in every way, shape, or form look like your standard subdivision. They're just trying to utilize what is a public road which was not designed to support this project. And so, and obviously there's a legal distinction. We're not going to be able to fully litigate that matter here, but that's the administration's position, is that this private development should not be supported by the public in terms of having to perhaps at a minimum widen Becker or some other improvements to it, or to the extent Becker is actually going to disintegrate once it has to support the traffic from this development. And again, the public would have to bear that burden. We don't permit subdivisions which have that type of impact on the city at large. The developer needs to pay for those impacts. Mm-hmm. And so that's in summary the nature of the dispute.
So, and not to, let me see if I understand the consequences of what you just said. One of the issues is width.
I believe that's...
I mean, just to kind of simplify it so people understand. So if, and I'm just going to take that one item, I'm not trying to deal with everything. So if they proposed a solution where they could widen the road, I mean, does this road have curbs on it?
No.
If they added a lay-down curb and a section of concrete on both ends to make it the proper width, I'm not saying that's acceptable. I'm just saying that could be an approach to make it wide enough to make the standard. But you're also suggesting that the bearing capacity or the technical specification of the road itself is in question.
Yes.
And that's also a problem that needs to be addressed.
Correct, and it was the administration's position that if we can get some more data in the form of boring specifically, they could better ascertain exactly what the capacity, the loads of this road would be.
So are we asking the applicant to do those borings?
We've had some discussions. I don't necessarily want to air all of our negotiations here in public. They've been very professional to deal with, and obviously we're not able to have a meeting of the minds on any of those specifics.
So the answer is maybe.
The answer is we explored many options.
Okay.
So, I mean, for the public, people, for us to understand on the commission, at least two of the issues, there may be more, but at least two of the issues are width and technical specification of the roadbed.
Correct.
And if in some arrangement those things could be addressed, I'm not saying how, then that might make this proposal acceptable. If it can be supported with technical evidence.
Again, further hard data gets everyone closer to understanding exactly what will or will not work out there.
Comments?
If I may address, when we use the word subdivision, in my mind, being a country kid from Medina County, subdivision entails new roads going in. This is an existing road, and when we say subdivision, these houses are going to be built on where that road exists, on the west side of Becker Road. So when you think of the word subdivision, this isn't your typical subdivision where other roads are being put in. I would agree that if we're putting a subdivision that would go further in, that you need roads, then this would be an issue. I think what Mr. Zeisman has said is actually supports us, that now with the marsh being there, it was originally platted for 32 houses. And now a lot of those can't be developed, and quite frankly, probably never will. So this proposal doesn't expand the use beyond what it was originally plotted for. The fact that it's a road that may or may not have proper bearing weight, it's been fine all these years. The people there have been paying taxes on it. I assume it's been maintained.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
You may know the answer, the city may know the answer. How old is the current roadbed? How long has it been in the state? Technically, when it was installed, that roadbed now?
We don't know.
You don't know, do you know?
We're going to be finding that out because we tried some informal discussion. There was our understanding through Mr. Novak that that was slated to be redone at one point. I've got a letter back this week saying from the city engineer that they don't recall that it was ever on the proposal to resurface it. So we will have a sunshine law, also known as a FOIA request to the city, asking for any and all plans in the past to resurface this. So the answer to your question is, I don't know.
And the city doesn't know. Okay, well, I mean, that's actually the answer, because that leads to my opinion that at some point, that roadbed will or has failed its original specification, regardless of the use, regardless of how many houses were or were not built. A road only has a certain life expectancy, and until somebody can tell me that that roadbed has not exceeded its life expectancy, then it's hard to make a judgment, at least on the existing condition, but also with the concerns that the city has. So.
Good evening, my name is David Novak from Barrington Consulting Group. And I'd like to just reiterate something that Mr. Varga is indicating, that if this road is not of the sufficient width, and again, these folks have been paying taxes on this for many years, why does not the city of Mentor go throughout the city of Mentor, find all the streets that are substandard width, and repair them? It just doesn't make sense. And again, we have a road that's functioning. Whether it was built 100 years ago or 20 years ago, it functions today.
And not to be argumentative, but if it's lost, if it's gone beyond its life expectancy, it may not be functioning. I mean, it may be beyond its level of function. It may not be immediately falling apart, but as a useful road, it may not.
But if you go under that premise, if it's reached its usefulness or its functionality as a road within the city of Mentor, why is it not the burden of the city of Mentor to repair and replace? If we never came along, at some point in time, that street will fall apart, whether it's another 100 years from today.
And again, not to get into an argumentative thing, but that's not really the issue in front of us. What's in front of us is whether the proposal is acceptable as a plan to be extended or to be done relative to the proposal that's been made. And it's not, whether who pays for that's not our job. So we're just here to figure out whether that road can be made part of this plan and be approvable. And the suggestion of the city is that their judgment is that it's not approvable relative to the plan. Who pays for the improvements? I'm not sticking my toe into that, okay? But our decision is not who pays for it. That's not our decision. It's whether or not it's required for development or not. Okay. Am I saying that correctly?
I think. So I'm not sure we can come to any kind of resolution here this evening, so what do you guys suggest?
I mean, excuse me.
Any thoughts?
Well, my concern is that his concern, my concern. We can't make a decision until there's a definitive ruling on or finding on the condition of the road and or what's required to improve the road, in order to make it part of the plan that you want us to approve.
The other option is you approve it with that condition and we fight it at city council, and based upon their final decision, then it goes either the acceptance or
Well,
indication.
the problem with, that's like trying to move forward based on some unknown.
Kick the can down the road.
Yeah, I don't like doing that. I mean, you know, our decision would be assuming an agreement, and we can't assume an agreement. I mean, because there may not be agreement, you know. So if we move forward on the basis of some future agreement that isn't in existence, I don't think that's a good thing for us to do. I don't want to speak for the group. I mean,
Mr. Zeman, any comments?
Again, I think the issues have been pretty well articulated here. The Planning Commission can act on it, it can table it, it's your discretion at this juncture.
Well, if we table it, where does it go?
I don't know that there is any plan in place to be able to answer some of those inquiries relative to Becker and subsurface conditions. Well, we know it's non-conforming in certain respects, but again.
well, and if we approve it with the 4 conditions, it's off our table. I mean, it's kind of kicking the can down, but it's within our role to do that, right? Our role
Correct.
isn't to decide-
Obviously, there's been the objection to condition number 2 is noted. That's not going to be waived. And obviously, the Planning Commission may strike condition number 2. And you certainly have the discretion to do that. The administration has encouraged you not to. The objection, obviously, on the part of the applicant is noted, and so your action tonight, you've got a number of different directions you can go in.
Let me ask one last question. Then there is no other real outstanding issue about this from an engineering point of view, other than the fact that the road, other than the condition number 2. There's nothing else outstanding that's holding this back, other than that one issue. It's a big issue, but it's that one issue, right? So,
Well, there is as we note in item 1, I mean,
Well,
all of the comments of the city engineer have to be addressed.
what I'm saying is that from a design point of view, it's acceptable except for those 4 conditions.
We do still need some clarity relative to Block A and Block B and exactly how that's going to be treated.
Yeah, but that's one of the conditions, right?
It is, and yet, as we said here, we don't have any clarity on it, so that obviously is going forward a bit of a concern. We don't want those parcels
Well,
to just
I
end
don't
up to
want
be
to unnecessarily
public.
delay them, you know? I mean, if we approve it with the 4 conditions, then you guys got to resolve these issues.
I don't know what their timetable is.
Well, I understand. Mr. Chairman, I think it's yours.
Make a motion.
I make a motion to accept, to approve with 4 conditions.
I'll second that.
Mr. Sidoti,
No.
Mr. Tiedemann,
Yes.
Mr. Varga,
Yes?
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic,
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes.
Thank you.
Kick the can down.
And down the road, we can just resolve our end of it now. It's approvable, just-
Anything else?
Director's reports?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
I guess today and maybe even yesterday, I'm just trying to recall all the emails that I received, but you had received electronically via Dropbox the packet. And I guess we'd just like some feedback. Are all of you comfortable using that moving forward? I know some of you are going to give me a vehement yes, but is that a unanimous thing? Do we want to continue to receive the paper packet? We'd like to work towards that. That's always been a goal, and we're excited that we've been able to work through some of those little quirks, but we just wanted some feedback.
So when
I don't
will-
think I have to give my feedback.
When will it be available electronically? Now we get the packets on Friday. Will it still be Friday?
Yep.
Yes.
But it would just, yeah, and we could, again, depending on your preference, we can always provide you with a packet. If you wanted to have it, some people just prefer, especially when you're at the table, some people prefer to have it in front of you. Others prefer to have it on their iPad or whatever. So it's a preference thing.
Can everybody in the group work electronically like that from home? Can they actually get the packet? Do they have a computer? Do they have an internet connection? Do they have? Are they able to do that? I mean, the assumption is yes, but
You have to use the Dropbox feature because the volume, the size of the files are too large to just send them to you via email. So you would have to create, creating the account, right? It's pretty simple as I understand it.
So
I think they actually do not need to create an account to access the files. That's an option, though. Some people.
can we download without an account?
Yes.
You can download what Jess sent recently. You don't even need that Dropbox, but you can download each file if you wanted to.
Now, let me ask this question, though. So we all come to the meeting and we don't have nothing in our hands. How do we, I mean, from a functional point of view, we look at this information, do
Well,
we have
can
to
we
print?
can still provide them at the meeting. I mean,
Okay, that's what I was alluding to. Could
that's
you?
an option, but it's not us running out on Fridays, delivering it to
Understand,
every house.
understand. I think wouldn't it be useful to have the documents in front of us during the meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think that would,
I prefer that.
so I think that, I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, but I
Sure.
think that would work. We can review the documentation with the Dropbox and that procedure as long as we have the same information at the meeting, so because otherwise we would be sitting here playing with our glasses, you know. Trying to remember what's.
Unless you do it the way I did it tonight and just
Does
use
the
them.
city want to provide us all with those?
No, that's,
Actually, what we
Just
can
an option.
provide as far as the packet online is we can provide you with additional information that you may not get right now. Improvement plans can be part of that for subdivisions.
No.
More detailed drawings that right now we don't necessarily get, or if we are provided them, they just make the current packet so much larger that we can't get it in all the envelopes.
No,
So
I
we've
understand.
cut things down considerably. Traffic impact studies, things like that, we can also include in there. But right now, we don't, just due to the volume that we have in a lot of cases. But I personally prefer to have a paper plan in front of me when I'm reviewing them.
And
We
when
can
we're
always
having the
the packets will be done still on Friday, sent out to you. You can look at them on your phone, on your pad, wherever you're at. You don't have to be at home. But if you still want the paper packet, you can make arrangements for us to drop it off, or you can even stop in the city hall and pick it up the week of the meeting. Because they'll still be available.
Or wait till the day of the meeting. It's up to you. You could just let us know your preference.
Well, we could try it. I would like to have the packet for the meeting, though, here on the desk. Because I can't remember all that stuff.
Maybe for now, if
Sorry, what are we talking
any
about?
members just want to opt out of a physical packet being delivered, you can do that, and maybe over time it
I think that's a good idea.
I think that's a good idea.
I will have to say that I was out of town, and so the electronic version was a nice thing to have because I was able to review, and it cut down my reading time when I got home. So that worked well. So combination might be the thing.
The electronic version is nice, you know where I'm going with this. But I like the packets because I take them into the field.
Sure.
And it's just so much easier to put the car aside and start working on the packets and making notes and, you know, that's what I use them for. That's why I find it to be advantageous.
Well, I guess I would ask that if you have a particular preference, if you want it before the meeting, just let us know. If you could send an email
All right.
to either to Jess or to, I don't know if you have our emails, you can send it to us directly, copy all of us on it. That's probably even better than the three of us know what's going on.
All right.
But that'll help us. If you have a preference, we'll certainly honor that. We're not trying to make this harder. We're just actually, for some that have requested.
So you're
making it
willing, if one or two people still want the packets on
Sure.
Friday, you still do that, but if the rest of us take it electronically, that's
Yep.
good too. All right.
The other nice thing about the electronic is right now you get the 11.5 by 17 paper, hard to read. Electronically, you can zoom in on everything.
Right.
Big advantage.
Okay.
Works for you?
Works for me.
Okay. Anything else, Kat?
I think I've talked enough.
No, you've never talked enough.
Is that a motion?
Motion to
Adjourn.
adjourn, yeah.